What is the most valuable asset that you develop with your own podcast or show that can actually generate another 100K minimum? It could even be multiple six figures or even pull you into seven figures in your business. Hey, it's Melanie Benson here. I am an authority amplifier. I am the host of the top 1.5% show, Amplifier Success. We're getting ready to enter our seventh season here shortly. And I also am the creator of a program called the 100K Authority Accelerator. And so I've been sharing some of the milestones of my podcast, and people are like, okay, how did you do that? And if you caught part one of this series that I did the other day, then you know that pod fade is a real thing. This is when people give up on a show or a podcast because it's not creating the outcome they were hoping for. It's not really getting them traction. It's not getting them clients. It's not making them money. Sounding familiar? And possibly it's costing you a lot of money and time, and you're starting to feel frustrated. And I have coached a lot of really talented, really smart, expert-based entrepreneurs on how to really integrate their show into their business model so it is working for them and it's not costing them. It's literally an investment in marketing to attract the right people. And there's so many ways to do this. What I'm sharing is just what works for me. It's what, having tested a lot of things kind of is the sweet spot for us, but there are several strategies of how to leverage a show like this for client attraction and to build your authority in your marketplace. So just know it's not one size fits all, but you are welcome to um, take what I'm learning here and implement it on your own if you want to. So this is part two of the 100K year podcast model. And I want to share what I really consider to be probably the single most important asset that you're creating with this kind of what I call authority podcast or authority show. And that is something you can leverage over and over and over again in multiple ways to grow the reach of your work, to expand your opportunities to attract clients. But also, it's an asset that has value with collaboration partners and the market at large, right? Like, because really, what you're doing is you're becoming an asset that is akin to media coverage. So there's a lot of value in that. But and by the way, if you didn't catch part one and you're not seeing it wherever you're watching this, and you're like, Melanie, like I want to catch the first two parts of the formula, just drop the words part one in the comments below, and we'll link you up with the URL to watch the first episode. So what I covered in the first, I'm calling it an episode, but the first of the series is I covered the first one. I really thought I was going to get through two, but I want to keep these short so it's easy for you to get through them. And so I gave you a little bit of foundation, and then we talked about number one, which is topic optimization, and why that's so critical if you want a podcast that's actually going to perform for you, to be able to attract clients, to stand out in your marketplace and do all the cool stuff that it can do for you. So we're going to get into 2 and 3, and then we've got 2 more for the third in the series. So today we're talking about audience growth and how your podcast can be used for lead nurturing and what I like to call the binge effect. Okay. So let me just say how this all works. When you have a show of any kind, really, like, your core most important thing is the relationship that you develop with your audience. I really feel that show hosts and podcasters, we are cultivating a culture, if you will. Like, we're creating a community. And so what we create for our audience is either going to get them coming back, or they'll just dip in and out when there's something interesting, or they won't come back. Okay. And what we really want, and what I want for you, and I feel like we have some form of this, is we have listeners who share the episodes, who tell me when I'm spot on something. They're like, oh my gosh, that was so great. Like, I hear from them. And you want audience members who keep coming back, because that's what continues to, for practical purposes, pump the algorithms up and help you really rank higher in the podcast world. And that matters not for everyone. That was one of my goals is I wanted to have a high ranking podcast, because as an authority amplifier, the work that I do in the world, like having positioning like that matters. And it's part of the formula of how you stand out in a marketplace. Okay. So it's not the only reason I have my podcast, but it was part of what I wanted to achieve. So that was part of the strategy. Now, let's talk about audience growth. And I think this is where people get stymied. And I was working with somebody last year to launch their show. And one of the things that got them really nervous was, how am I going to attract an audience? And so I have this toolkit called the Authority Brand Podcast Toolkit. And one of the things I said is, like, when we follow this formula, and you're using the tools I teach in the Accelerator program, like you are actually going to attract the right people into your audience. And if you keep delivering great content, you're going to keep that audience happy. So here's the formula I was working on with them, and I work on it for my podcast and for everybody that I help integrate this into their Authority Accelerator system. First of all, I believe, and some people really want a podcast that's just them, and I get that, but there is something powerful about interviewing the right guests on your show. And there's a whole strategy to this. I'm not going to unpack that here, but let's just say that when you are getting guests to be on your show, first of all, especially if they're high profile guests, you're borrowing their influence. Okay, that goes both ways, but what you want, especially if you're just starting out, is to have really high profile, valuable guests who are bringing massively aligned and relevant content, and will drop a lot of value bombs. And that will help you get people to start listening. So you're leveraging the relationship currency, if you will, the visibility of the guests that you're bringing on. The second thing is, you're hoping, and when done properly, when you really know how to manage guests, they also are sharing it to their community. So now you're getting exponential exposure. And a lot of people don't really know how to navigate this with their guests. And so it's kind of hit and miss if a guest really shares. And there's a little bit of a sweet spot in the level of credibility and authority somebody has in the market, whether or not they're likely to share it. So you're looking for the right kind of guests to interview. And so, look, if you want to have a show where it's all about you and your topics, that's great. But maybe kind of balance it, like have some episodes about you and your topics, and have some where you're bringing in guests. I think it's like 75% guests, 25% solo, somewhere around there, 20%, 25% me. And I do that strategically. And when I get to the second point in lead nurturing, you'll understand why. So that's step one, is really bringing the right guests. And part of the guest piece too is, think about, their audiences are going to become your audiences, right? And so you want to be able to bring guests on that are going to help grow the right listener base for your show. So I get pitched so much, and I'm really flattered when people want to be on the show. I wish I could have everybody on the show. We can't. We just don't have enough airspace for that. But we pick strategically the people to come on the show because we believe, A, they have value, and B, they have the right audiences. Because I don't necessarily want to attract non-aligned clients and community to come into the Amplifier Authority community. Now, the second piece on audience growth, and I'm covering this really fast so that we can keep these each piece of the series a little shorter. But look, if you're not doing this, and by the way, this one can stand on its own. If you know me at all, you know this is what I teach all the time, is being a guest on other people's shows and podcasts, OPP, other people's platforms. It's one of the top drivers of audience growth. And I see a lot of podcasters completely dropping the ball in this. They are not getting themselves in front of the right audiences. They're not getting on other people's shows. And, it's harder to grow an audience that way. Yes, there are other factors like topic development, but why not? And this also opens up something we're going to talk about in the next and last piece of the series, and that's the collaboration. So this is actually part of the secret sauce of how everything works well for me. Is I'm on someone else's podcast, I'm talking about a relevant topic, something that's really hot in that market, in that industry, that audience. And then they want to come listen to my podcast, right? Because now they're like, well, I like what she's talking about. Let me see what else she's got. Third is saying yes to invitations to be on podcast pitch panels is a really great strategy. So this is where you get a different kind of visibility to grow your audience. And again, super strategic move. It's not for everybody. And not everybody's going to get invitations, and I will give a big kudos to one of my dear friends who's been a podcaster for many years. She kind of hooked me into this. JJ Flazanes of Spirit Purpose Spirit. Wow, now I can't remember what her show's called. It's been a little while. Sorry, JJ. She's got several podcasts. But anyway, the podcast pitch panels is really great because oftentimes the host of whatever event this is telling everyone in the audience, if you want to pitch these podcasters, you need to go binge listen to their shows. So what does that do for you? All of a sudden, you have got 50, 100, 200, 500 people binging your show. At least 30 to 40% of them are going to stay. They're going to keep listening. Some of them, they're not going to be the right fit, and that's okay. They're not going to keep listening, but a lot of them will. And secondly, you now get your status elevated. This is boosting your authority. You're going from just a podcast host or a show host to someone who is absolutely a expert and authority. And in some audiences, it was called being an icon, right? So that podcast pitch panel is a great visibility strategy to get more listeners to come check out your show. And if you have a hard time getting guests, this is a great way to get guests. And then last, and this is kind of a no-brainer, but again, a lot of people are not doing this. It's you want to share it with your own community. So I'll talk about marketing a little bit in the last piece of the series, but let's just say that your email community, your social community, they care what you are up to if they're still paying attention to what you put out. And so letting them know about episodes that you're dropping is a great way to get people to keep listening. So I'll unpack that more in the last piece of this puzzle. So that's audience growth. There's probably some things that I've left out and forgot, but that's the basics. And yeah, if you're starting to go, wow, there's a lot involved. There is. Like I said in the first part of the series, this is a business. And it's part of a marketing strategy that works when you work it. So now let me quickly unpack number 2 here, and number 3, and that's lead nurturing. This is a big part of what I teach in the 100K Authority Accelerator program. There is an entire strategy of being a guest on other people's platforms, live stages, virtual stages, podcasts, shows, online shows, streamed shows. All of those are opportunities for you to get in front of new audiences. But the way this should work is when you are being featured on that other podcast or that other show, we'll just say podcast, and you can plug in whatever words you want. And you have a really powerful, what I call magnetic money talk. And that topic is popping for that community, and they listen to that episode. When you're being introduced, obviously you should be including, yes, I am the host of such and such show. Now, if you've done a good job with that magnetic money talk, you're pulling in a audience of new listeners, and they're saying yes to whatever your call to action or your invitation is. But even if they access your freebie, they still want to vet you. Why? Because we all know that freebies are pre-crafted resources that have been well thought out. It does not always give a potential client a great purview into who you really are. It's a kind of like a one-dimensional experience of a multi-dimensional human being that they're potentially going to work with. And so they want to vet you somehow. And what I discovered, and I uncovered this accidentally, asking people how they ended up saying yes to consultations with me, is your show can become the binge quality, the binge effect, where they hear you, they might say yes and download the call to action, but they still need to get to know you. They want to vet you. And so now they're researching you and they will binge your show. They will binge your podcast and listen to you to figure out, are you the real deal? Puppy update there. Are you the real deal? Are you someone that has credibility? Are you believable? Do they feel a sense of rapport? Do they want to learn and grow with you more after listening to you on the podcast as you're having conversations with them, as you're having conversations with your guests, or you're dropping your own nuggets? This is where they really decide, do I want more, or am I feeling put off? There's a disconnect. I don't really get it, right? So this is where what you do with your show is so powerful. Now, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I'm all in with being a guest on other people's platforms, but I don't know about my own show, there are other ways to accomplish this. Okay, it's something we deep dive into in another format under the 100K Authority Accelerator, because it's a kind of a big strategy. But just know, if you set this up right, what could be happening is you are attracting a lead. They're very interesting, but not 100% sold. They're not 100% yes. They are going to binge you, hopefully through your own show. And you are literally selling them on your offer and working with you in a very short period of time. And typically, this is what happens for me at least, within the first 7 days of them hearing you, they research your show, they binge you, they're going to book a consultation, or they're going to take the action, whatever that action is, invest in your program. Typically, because I do high ticket, it'd say, raise your hand, say, I want to meet with you. And then we book a consult. And most of the time, they either enroll right on the spot in a 4 or 5 figure offer, or within a day or two, they're a yes. And that's because I believe that when we share our message in these formats, as a guest on someone else, where you can't really control the conversation, but you're being showcased, and then through you kind of repeating that binging of you and your message and your energy, they really get that they need and want what you do. So that's the lead nurturing aspect of it. Now, there are actually 5 ways that leads are developed, and this is probably maybe 30% of the lead possibility. There's 4 more strategies that I cover in 100K Authority Accelerator, because I don't want you to think that's the only way it works. There are other ways we're going to build our own audience and develop leads that might take a little bit more time to pay off. Okay, so in the last session that we're going to do unpacking the strategy, I'm going to cover the last 2 elements. And one of these is where 95% of show hosts and expert-based entrepreneurs that use this kind of format leave massive money and opportunity on the table. I hope you're hooked. I can't wait to share this last piece, because it's actually one of my favorite pieces of this, and one of the 3 key reasons why I started my podcast in the first place. And this is where you can exponentially expand the revenue and visibility opportunities. Okay, drop a part 1 if you want to hear part 1 and you missed it and you can't find it. Drop it in the comments. And hey, if you've already had an aha, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. Tell me what you're going, boom. That's what I wanted to hear. This is what I needed to know. I am so excited to share the last piece. I'll be back real soon.